Hello and welcome. This is episode 10 of a podcast Engineer-to-Manager. My name is Oleg Maestrenko. I am podcaster and advisor to the CDTO here in Kiev, City Council, Ukraine. In this podcast, we are diving into the essence of engineering management. We explore what engineering management is and what are the challenges and, opportunities in their engineering management domain. For this journey, I will invite experienced engineering managers from different parts of the world. Today's guest is Claus Höfele. Hello, Klaus. How are you doing? Wie geht's?
Hello, Oleg. Hey, so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Es geht gut.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So you are now a director of engineering at ON, right? ON. You have worked in various management roles for the last 5 years, as far as I understand, and you have this transition, which is very interesting, from a developer to a team lead, and then became engineering manager, and finally head of engineering. What's also interesting, you work in different domains, e-commerce at eBay, IoT at here, medical at Ada Health and the Doctari Group, and now at sports goods manufacturing, like completely different things you're doing throughout your professional life. And that's really like a multidimensional thing. So that would be interesting to touch it, how you managed to change the domains. Is everything correct? Would you like to add anything, Klaus?
Yeah, you're totally right. So I've had my start as a software engineer. So I programmed Java applet, mobile phones, PlayStation consoles, and also had a lot of a good time working on mobile apps for iPhones. And as you mentioned, I worked my way up, became a senior engineer and a tech lead and an engineering manager, and finally also managing several teams. So that's kind of the role I'm now as a head of engineering or director of engineering, as it's called. Yeah.
So, dear listeners, before we dive into this conversation, please pause this video, go down here, put the like, subscribe if you haven't. We got more traction recently. Really like to see the feedback from the community. And let's talk about your career, Klaus. Here's this transition, right? So you were developing code, you said you were doing lots of different things, and suddenly you said like, okay, this is not for me anymore, probably, and I am gonna manage people. How did this happen, and why you did it in the first place?
Yeah, sounds, now that I'm thinking about it, sounds more drastic than it probably was, because I think there, in this transition, there were large periods where writing code and starting to manage people overlapped. And usually, I think you had Pat Qua on the podcast as well. He talked about like different models of engineering managers and tech leads, right? Yeah. So that's a model where tech leads are kind of still hands-on, but also start dipping their toes into management. And this was my path. And there's certainly a size of team where you can still do this, and it's an exciting time. I think it works if the team size is small, if you're also very confident in your domain. At the time, I worked for a number of years in iOS, and so kind of taking on management responsibilities was also like a good step up for me to try this out. And
so just to understand, you were building on your domain expertise in some company, and then you said like, okay, I can grow in the direction of management since I have a good grip on the technology and the business side, right?
Yeah, I think so. I was working for several years on mobile phones, and then in a job transition, then I became a manager. And then basically my job was to build up the mobile team. And maybe starting with technology is not such a bad idea. It doesn't help you too much managing people, but at least gives you the confidence, to talk to fellow engineers and also to hire engineers, and, to understand and maybe organize the projects and the products around this technology.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what has been your motivation? Why did you go this way?
I think when you any technical product is quickly becoming complex enough that you need an entire team and maybe even an organization around it. And I think this is what kind of got me excited to basically work on bigger products, on more interesting products, not by myself, but have a bigger impact, have a bigger leverage. And I was always fascinated. I mean, technology is fairly predictable, right? And there's constantly something new to learn, but it's fairly predictable. Whereas, people are usually very unpredictable. And
well, in technology, there are some challenges coming, right? Nobody was expecting the boom of ChatGPT or LLMs these days. Yeah. And if we go back, 5-6 years ago, lots of people started talking about blockchain technologies, out of a blue, right? So this came out of the market, and okay, this is a new cut, a new step aside. So, I wouldn't be that sure, but in general, if you work for an enterprise, then typically this doesn't change drastically. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, with iOS, I think the cool thing was, it's basically an Apple ecosystem, right? So the highlight of the year was always to attend WWDC, see what new stuff they come up with, and then you dug into the documents and tried it out and downloaded the beta. So there was a really cool, or is still a very cool ecosystem on, when do you need to learn something new, when they now have these VR glasses. So I would be totally into actually trying this out, but I'm a bit far away from this right now. But there's a cool time and an interesting ecosystem when you need to dive into new technologies, right? But of course, I understand some certain things are unpredictable, and you have to be quick on your feet to learn new technologies.
So basically, you said that you moved to the people management because you were kind of pretty stable with your technology domain, and you wanted to go ahead with something that's not that easy to comprehend and to manage. Do I perceive it correctly?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting goal, to bring different people together with different skills and different experience and different motivations, and help them achieve a goal together, right? I think that's what leadership is about. And I think it took basically in the beginning I didn't realize, but basically this was a total career change, because the books I'm now reading or the skills I'm developing over several years was basically like a second career journey, right? It was a bit helped by this kind of transition period, because you have to get your start somewhere. But over the time you mentioned, I've been several years now managing teams. It became much more important to me, how does communication work? How do I build trust with people? How do we communicate properly, and maybe also facilitating workshops, engaging engineers. So I'm not the one anymore who has to have all the answers. It's more my job, to get people in the room and help them find a good answer.
Okay, yeah. So basically you were facilitating their communication. And what did you miss when you moved from development to their management? Like what skills did you miss? Because we obviously, as a senior, as we grow as a developers, people are getting hard skills and soft skills, right? And with the soft skills, not everybody is on the same level. So when you moved to EM role, what skills you were lacking from this point as you look in the past?
I think, like most engineering managers or tech lead, I think I was totally unprepared and a bit thrown into the deep end of everything, and then developed my own kind of systems or frameworks, or I read a lot of books. Or what always helped me was, first of all, talking and talking to your manager. What is their experience? Because I think a lot of leadership and management needs to be learned on the job, right? There's only so much you can learn out of books. And what always helped me as well is also like working with really skilled agile coaches whose kind of expertise is, around collaboration, communication, and, bouncing off ideas or working together with agile coaches also help.
And what book has been most influential for you in that period of time?
Something I read very early on was, it's called The Facilitator's Guide to Participative Decision Making. It's a complex title, but essentially what it was about was like different models of decision making and how can you apply this to a team. And because this is essentially really something you bump into all the time, someone is proposing a new framework, and you need to maybe make a decision, what are we going to use? Or are we using Swift or Objective-C, right? Or this library or that library? And it's not so much, I don't find it helpful as a leader to be the person to say yes or no, because what is really important in these decisions is also the buy-in from the team, right? You can't make everyone happy, but at least you need the buy-in from the team, because if they don't use the frameworks, or if you want to get started with unit testing and you don't have the buy-in of the team, you don't get very far, right? And then from this book, I learned a way of decision making that kind of checked how much people are buying into a decision. And it was it's not quite consensus, but at least, people should feel okay with these decisions. And there was a way of achieving a good decision with everyone. So I applied this fairly early, and this has been with me ever since.
Would you recommend to our listeners to read it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Nowadays I'm even more bought into like collaboration and facilitation and different kinds of decision making. Like the interesting method is like a scale of agreement. So going away from yes, no decisions towards, on a scale from 1 to 5, how much do I agree? And maybe a 3 is okay. If you don't mind using, if you don't mind or you're not affected, then maybe a 3 is okay. But you also need people who are, bought into with a 5, 4 or 5 to help you drive certain topics. And this kind of scale of agreement is much more easier to handle than a yes and no, which is sometimes a little bit too simple for
well, come on. Our world is gray. It's not black and white. There is always something in the middle that you have to handle. And from your experience, if we're talking about this scale of agreement, how many people have to accept their idea to promote it further and to make sure that the group accept the whole idea?
This is also really well explained in the book. The way I did it was that everyone has to at least be okay with the decision. I think the way it gets constructive is that if people say, "Hey, I disagree," then they also supposed to suggest a solution. How to one up their number on this scale. So if I say, "Hey, I'm not convinced, I'm a 2 on this, but I would suggest to do this or get more information or try this out," and then I would be okay with the decision. So that kind of turns it into something constructive. And to answer your question, how high do these numbers need to be? How much needs the buy-in to be? I think it depends a lot on how important the decision is. Like maybe certain things, code formatting can be changed very easily. Whereas if you switch to a different programming language or to an entire new framework, right, it's a kind of a very big decision. So, and always made it like the bigger the decision, the longer lasting the impact of the decision, the higher buy-in we should achieve.
Okay. Because I think I read somewhere research that actually, if you have a group of people, then not that many people have to agree, but they have to be quite active in promoting their decision or solution. And if there is like a small number of people, but they're like following their decision, promoting it, talking about it, and kind of the whole group gets influenced by those small amount of people, and you don't need a complete buy-in with anything that you're bringing, but you need really active, like few active people to get the word spread out, and there people seeing that their idea or their solution that you're bringing works, right?
No. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Maybe some are maybe in the team are multipliers, and it helps to have them on board. In my teams, I was fairly, I would say, democratic, and I kind of took account everyone's opinion. But I totally see how that would help. Yeah.
We want to talk a little bit about a different topic, which you published recently on your blog post about the positive psychology. And actually, this brings me to the question, like, because you cannot make everyone happy. That's a word, right? And some people might be unhappy, and this influences their overall work satisfaction, work-life balance, attitude towards company, your team, project they're working on. And then basically we go through different emotion cycles and so on and so forth. And what is a good strategy to handle those people who are really not happy with the decision the team is making?
No. Because you mentioned positive psychology, I mean, I went through different phases of, thinking about what kind of leadership style fits me, what kind of framework can I use. And I'm certainly influenced in the last couple of years by positive psychology. And I think what it's basically about is looking at what's already working and trying to amplify, rather than the more traditional approach, which is more looking at the problem and how can I fix something. Not because there are no problems, but there's more than problems.
Is it kind of sort of closing the eyes and not seeing the problems? Is it what I hear, or is it somehow playing around the problem?
It's more like balancing problems out with amplifying good things, because there is a certain bias in us to always focus on the problem, on the negative part. So it's not about removing this part. It's more like balancing it out to have, equal sides. And maybe as an example, I think what I feel is a very good, like a performance review or feedback approach. It's from a positive psychology book. It's called PP5. And what it does is basically it kind of splits your time. Let's say you give someone a review and you have 60 minutes. You split it into 3 parts. The first part is about something positive, because this sets up people in a positive mood and encourages them to continue doing what they're already doing well. And the second part is about focusing maybe on something that doesn't quite work, but looking at, what's already possible, what's already working. Like maybe your communication skills are not up to scratch. Maybe your unit testing skills are not up to scratch, but at least you have already started something. So let's also respect this, that you made progress. And then the third part is about, what's missing, what can we make as an improvement. And this way you kind of touched on, positive, negatives and in between things, and kind of balance it out to have a full picture of, how you can improve.
Yeah, because I've often heard we don't need problems, we need solutions. So, just think about the problem and bring me the solution. And what you're saying, it's a little bit different focus, and they're saying, okay, there are problems, but basically then let's see and multiply what is working, and then see how this influences the problem, right? So the problem might go away. So I think this was one of the operation system books that I've read in my university times, when they said like how we can tackle the problem. And the first approach was, if we ignore the problem might ignore us as well. So basically saying, okay, well, it is there, we might ignore it, and let's look on something different that kind of works for us.
I think the kind of problem solution approach would be looking at the problem and then finding ways to fix it, which is a totally fair approach. And I think the positive psychology approach would maybe look do all teams have these problems? Why don't they have? Why is there a team that maybe does better with this problem than we do? What can we learn from them, and then amplifying, what's already working. That might be the positive way at looking at things. And both is necessary, right? Like we have to balance it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I read a little bit about their positive psychology, and I understood there are like 5 different aspects, being safety, emotion, attitude, mood, which is very close for me with emotional intelligence, overall, fun, flow, and creativity, right? There are different aspects that influence your whole situation. But before we go into that, is like, was it something personal that drove you, or was it completely from the work experience that you came to this theory and practice and try to work with it?
Life of a manager is often very busy. You run from one meeting to the other, and it sometimes feels like, there's always a fire burning and you always have to extinguish a fire. And I certainly was in this, treadmill, or in this situation where I felt, I always have to run around and extinguish fires. And then suddenly there were also breaks, maybe a vacation, or maybe nothing was on fire. And I was thinking, what I'm going to do now? I have nothing to do, right? I'm useless. And I somehow felt this is wrong, right? Because actually you should be happy about that certain things work, and actually that should be your work, to focus on the stuff that works, rather than on the fires and on the problems. And then I kind of found positive psychology, and that's exactly the approach. What certainly helped as well is that despite its name, like positive has a bit of a bad rap. Like it feels like everything is like happy. And
don't worry, be happy.
Exactly. But it actually has a really good scientific foundation. It's really psychologists working on this, also famous psychologists working on this, and it's often leadership styles. There are also a lot of often are very experience based, and of course I respect this as well. But having scientific arguments and scientific proofs in there, right? I think it's also super useful.
Yeah, I think all of us have this firefighting mode on a lot of times. And I would like to ask our listeners, like, can you go in the comments and write the amount of meetings you have the most on a single day? For me, I think it was like around 10-ish meetings during the day. You can complete nothing. So I'm just curious. Go ahead and write the biggest amount of meetings you had during a single day. And if that day is still in your mind with something that was really burning, just let us know. I'm really curious to hear your stories about that, because, well, we all know those moments when you're firefighting and not creating anything, but just rather trying to jungle with 7 balls, riding on a bike, like in that there all joke about managers. So yeah, it's interesting how you came to it, and how you're trying to apply. Do you feel their success, or do you feel the result of applying this to your professional career?
I think it's. I think certain topics are very, very prominent in positive psychology. For example, flow, the concept of being in flow and being very productive. Maybe more tactical. What I've used it for. You mentioned there are 5 different categories that kind of build a theory around what is actually a good, enjoyable work and life. And for example, I use these 5 categories in when I came into my current position, in asking the engineers, what are your relationships with work colleagues? How engaged do you feel with people? How motivated? How do you feel? How do you feel that what you're doing, ties into your motivation and the purpose of the company? And that gave me a bit of a discussion guideline where I could ask questions and receive good answers, and to also understand, where are things maybe not quite in order, where do I need to work on.
Can I put it this way, that it's also a framework for you to use during one-to-ones, during their career goal settings, to understand their whole mood of their team and the company? Would it be also applicable to check whether the company that you're going to work for is the one that fits you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they would allow me in an interview, I mean, you can ask this question in an interview. I think that would be super interesting. For example, towards your hiring manager. I could imagine using this as a survey. I mean, we use a engagement survey from a different company, but I think it's kind of influenced by these sort of questions and categories. And there's also like frameworks and kind of questionnaires where you as a leader can maybe do answer a questionnaire and get a feedback, how much are you on these scales, on how much is your leadership also based on these values and categories. So you can also get a feedback on this one.
That would be interesting to see if this could be, some of our listeners could apply and check like, okay, does this work for me? Is this a company for me? And there also good feedback for the company to provide such information to the people they hire, and hope there is a better match, an additional criterion to check people who are they working with or gonna work with. But positive psychology is not the only one theory that or book or amount of people that talk about wellness, I would say, at work. There are also others. We all know the rework, right, by DHH, I think the book, which talks about how to change their attitude and their style and the well-being. And also I found a book called A Brain-Friendly Workspace, why talented people quit and how to get them to stay, also talking about their wellness and well-being and the connectivity and not putting the people in this firefighting mode. Have you tried some other combination of those? So because it's typically their manager has several tools that the manager is using to be successful. What are your other tools?
No. I think the topic of psychological safety in a team, or also how to deal with trust, or how to build trust, between manager and employee, but also between the employees. I think this is a constant topic for investigation. There are really good books about, how team can collaborate. What does it exactly mean, trust? And also how does psychological safety work? And I think this is at the end of the day, really important, because it's the foundation of collaboration in a team. And you really can feel it, if you go into a meeting and the people don't trust each other, or they don't know, how to deal with each other. Discussions are very much on the surface and don't go deeper. You feel that there can't be really good outcomes come out of it. So that's certainly like, I sometimes use a team canvas, to actually understand, how is everyone's values, how do they align, can we bring them together in the team? We can also analyze, I think at the end of the day, this is also a bit about remote work or in-office work. I feel a little bit that trust is easier to build if you are in person in the same room, and you can engage people and collaborate towards something. We'll maybe later on talk also about facilitation techniques. But I think this is an important factor in this, that actually, by modeling good collaboration, you can actually start with a trust start building the trust over time. And then it's also much easier to go remote and then maybe have only a camera and nothing else.
So you are supporting Apple and Google bring people to the office, kind of saying like, let's bring together and let's spend some time, work time together in the office. So not like GitLab as an example, being remote first companies. There are a bunch of other remote first companies.
I think everyone, including me, underestimated how difficult it is to create a remote culture. And I think people still underestimate this. And I totally respect companies like I think GitHub and GitLab that you mentioned, who actually build up the tools and the culture to support this. And because people underestimate how difficult it is to create this engagement and collaboration remotely, I think the fallback might be, and that's a bit what I'm talking about, is the fallback is if you are in the same room, kind of, trust and collaboration builds fairly automatically. Not quite automatically, but it's a lot easier. And people also have, let's say, more tools at their disposal to do this. So I think I'm really interested in learning more about remote culture, about maybe working for a fully remote a company. But again, what I'm saying is people underestimate this. They just say, hey, I have the flexibility, I work from home,
but
also
don't care
the companies,
much about right? The companies are looking for talents wherever they can find. So if they can find a talent somewhere, location X, which is 5 time zones away, but this person suits their style, suits the need, their business need they have, and that they cannot bring this person over to the office, then they have to make a decision. Whereas they work with this person remotely, or they decide to stick to the office or partial office culture, right? So it's not about only people, but it's also the company taking their decision, right?
Yeah. And what you say, for example, about different time zones, right? As soon as the time zone is very different, you have to start focusing really a lot on written documentation and written communication. I think I've been in so many meetings where basically people said, hey, we used to have a meeting in person, now we are remote, we just have this meeting remote. And it's exactly the same, except, the bandwidth of understanding interaction is smaller. So companies haven't made this switch to a different ways of communicating, a different collaboration, different kinds of engagement. And I think this is kind of part of this underestimation, that this needs to maybe build into the company from the start, or at least needs to be a super conscious effort and intention to build up.
Now, you mentioned their facilitation and facilitation techniques. They definitely differ when everybody online and when everybody is offline, and when there is a mixture, right? Some people online, some people offline. What would be their facilitation things that you are typically use for the online meetings, as we are talking about online meetings?
I think two tools that really became the staple of online collaboration is Miro and Mural. Basically, whiteboards where you have a virtual wall of post-it notes, and also like team rooms in Zoom or in different video collaboration tools that you also can make smaller groups, right, and have them collaborate and then come together in a bigger group. And this is really key to everything. And to some degree, Miro and Mural, they work better than actual post-its, because you have everything in a tool. You can share it. It's digital. You can copy and paste it, or you can turn it into Jira tickets if you want. So in a big way, it might be even better. But you also have to realize that the interaction you see, you have a 2D display of some person. You have only audio. You can only see maybe the upper part of the body. Maybe sometimes you also need to switch off the camera, etc. So the bandwidth of the emotions and the interactions you get is much more limited. But remote facilitation and collaboration totally works. People do it. It's also an accessibility topic. For example, I can take part in a conference or in a workshop, in overseas, and don't have to travel there, right? So that's another advantage of
for some people, it might be a disadvantage for those who like traveling, right? I want to go and see the world, not sit in my room somewhere in location X, but travel and see. Because when you go to the conference, my personal experience is that online conferences are they should be either extremely good from their material wise, or they don't worth attending them, because basically you just do something on the side if you are not interested, and then you are slowly doing something on the side because you are not fully concentrated and you're missing their whole topic. The only difference is with the podcast when you're listening it, so then you can consume it with what you hear or what you see. But the conference is typically like people start asking questions and you get completely lost when you are just doing something in parallel, and then your spouse comes in or your kid, and you're talking to them, and well whatever, you're not in different location, in different mode, so to say, to consume the information.
And that's where facilitation comes in, because what often happens is people think, we had these in-presence conferences and we showed PowerPoint slides. So the direct translation is, hey, we do this online. We show PowerPoint slides and think this works. And as you said, it's not very engaging. It's easy to get distracted at home. So this doesn't work. And I think the switch that needs to happen is that it's more about the interaction with the audience as much as possible, and B, about the community, watching something together, being in the same kind of virtual community. And I think also people underestimate how hard this is then actually to build up a virtual community.
No, yeah, that's true. That's true. With their offline communicate, let's go to the mixed one, because it's very interesting when some people gather offline. I experienced this week actually when like 7 people were offline and 2 people were online because they couldn't join the meeting offline, and it looks even worse than all online or all offline. What would you recommend to do in such cases when we have this strange mixture?
Yeah, I think hybrid is everyone's worst nightmare, I think, to facilitate, right? Because basically you have to do both at the same time, online and offline facilitation in parallel, right? And in the beginning, I was really trying to be strict. Hey, in person fine, offline virtual fine, but not both. But to be honest, life happens, and somehow hybrid is kind of becoming normal, because there's hey, my kid is sick, I couldn't come in, so can I join remotely? Or we are sitting in the same room. It would be really silly if we each of us stared into a laptop and sitting next to each other, right? That's also silly. So I guess you just have to deal with it to some degree. I think it helps if you have Miro or Mural, that maybe people do bring their laptops and then look together at a big screen, but then also are able to work by themselves on the laptop. Like the best hybrid experience are really designed. There is an offline track and there's an online track, and sometimes they meet and have something in common, but often there's, it's 2 separate experiences. But that, of course, takes a lot of work.
And like, let's look on the one particular case. So you have let's say 5 people sitting in the room. 2 or 3 people being online, and then what typically happens is there are several discussions going in parallel because their connection might not be super fast, and sometimes the people who are online talking to somebody in the room, and then in the other corner, 2 people are sitting, they're just starting to chit chat about something. Would you stop such thing, or how would you recommend dealing with such thing? Because this is very typical what happens in the hybrid situation.
I think the first question is there actually someone who feels responsible for moderating the discussion, right? Because often that's not the case. You just meet and everyone is where they are. So and if you feel responsible for moderating the discussion, I think you can help a lot by taking turns involving people. So we had, for example, a leadership offsite recently. And because we have leaders in different regions, people from Asia and from the US couldn't join in person. And then you have to really do a lot of work to always asking, hey, what do you think? Have you heard this argument? And also keeping it one conversation. And an experienced and skilled facilitator can do this, but it's a lot of work.
Can you recommend several books on the facilitation so that our listeners can become more experienced and skilled in the facilitation?
Yeah, thinking about a good book, maybe a website. So I'm very fond of different frameworks and workshops from AJ&Smart. So if you Google that, AJ&Smart workshopper, then they have lots of blog entries and lots of great idea on what kind of structures can you use to engage a group of people. And they also talk a lot about online and offline facilitation. So what I did, for example, based on their ideas, we had this engagement survey, the numbers came back. And what we did in person was usually what happens is you look at the numbers, there's a lot of discussions, but no outcomes, and everyone is complaining.
Very typical situation. Very typical.
Exactly. And so what we did is, and what they suggest is working with silent brainstorming. So they call this working alone together. So everyone by themselves write down some ideas, then everyone comes together, puts them on a Post-it. There's dot voting to prioritize. There are different filters based on impact and effort. And then you really come after 2 hours, you really come away with really good to-dos that you can immediately, and also bigger projects that you as a leader can tackle over the long term.
Yeah, interesting. So we'll put their link to the site there in their notes and somewhere here on the screen, so that the people listening can follow it and check it out. You mentioned the leadership offsite, and basically I want to talk a little bit, switch the topic and talk a little bit about your current role. So you're 3 months, as far as I understand, in your current position. And what is very interesting, we touched a little bit about this, is how you approach getting in the new role, specifically when this is a leadership role, right? Because you're head of engineering. So how did you approach it? What was your plan? What was your check? How did it go?
I think the important part is that you have to find a balance between, getting into the thick of it and doing some actions, but you also have to start with listening. So really the first months, I tried to meet everyone, of course, the team, of course, every individual member of the team, but also peers and important business stakeholders. I went to Zurich, where the headquarter is, a different office of my company. So I was trying to meet as many people as possible, and always taking notes, then suddenly a picture emerges, certain patterns emerge, and you can, understand, what you're dealing with, what is actually the challenge. Because usually in the interview process, you have already a bit of an idea what might be the challenge, but you really have to listen to fully understand it. And I think one mistake many people do is, they come with, hey, I have these 3 frameworks. That's what I'm good in, and I'm now applying it to this new organization. But maybe they don't even need this, right? And after listening, there comes, maybe that's kind of the first month or the first 1.5 months. And after listening, I think putting together all these notes, what I did was kind of an overview, presenting an overview to my manager. This is what I'm seeing. These were the discussions I had. These are the patterns I'm seeing. And deciding basically on a strategy. What should I focus on? What is the first kind of priority on what we should tackle? And then maybe in the 3rd month, starting with actions, starting to make changes, helping people, and then going from there.
Yeah, well, makes sense. Are you happy so far with this plan? Did it work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the danger now is where I'm at is that I'm taking on too many projects. We talked about this, having this everywhere there's a fire and sitting in 10 meetings per day. I think you also have to pace yourself. And it's really not helpful if you try to tackle half a dozen of projects at the same time. You really have to prioritize, and there's always too much to do. So you can't do everything at the same time, and also pace yourself so you can really focus and having an impact on certain projects.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's talk not about your current company, but a rather situation when somebody onboards to a new company in their leadership role, and their what I've seen or heard from colleagues that basically when you start talking, interviewing people, you also see their possible tensions and possible, let's call it, politics that exist between different groups and people. What would be your advice would you advise to kind of start playing this politics or try changing them? Or how should people tackle and go in this stage and in the early stage of their work in the company?
Yeah, I think politics has certainly a bad rap and a bad name to it. I think what people say when they mean politics is maybe people are being manipulative, or everyone has their own agenda and they don't work together, right? It's like a negative way of working together.
Right. That's what I mean.
I think politics could also be positive in the sense that also, you have to be a bit intentional, who you involve, who you inform, how you communicate, right? There's, I think, also a positive aspect of politics if you see it as adapting your way of communication and collaboration to different needs and different styles, right? And I think I'm in the happy situation that I think I joined a company with little negative politics and lots of, I think, positive politics. I think this is maybe something you can't learn out of books. Maybe it's a bit of an experience. I always feel like it's also a bit up to me to perhaps check my ego. If I'm suggesting something, how much do I attach my identity to having this realized, and how much can I say, hey, this was just a suggestion, I'm not, my ego isn't hurt if maybe we approach it a different way, and maybe that's also good. So I'm also, checking in with yourself, how much you are attached yourself to certain outcomes.
It's interesting how you're applying the positive psychology, I feel it, to my question, because basically you're trying to see what works, and because we're collaborating there, right? They were talking to each other. Well, hopefully, you don't come across a situation when people just don't talk, but still kind of trying to multiply that collaboration to make sure that it works and multiply. So, nice application, and it's a very good thing to talk through, to kind of make sure you also trying to shift away from your mindset, because we all come with some mindset or framework, as you mentioned, and sometimes like you're really an external opinion really helps you kind of say like, Alex, well, look or talking out to this problem or to the situation, and you see there is a different solution or different idea. So I hope their positive psychology brings to our listeners this kind of additional tool or direction to look into their situations, like life situation and work related stuff. As you were saying, so you are head of engineering. You're 3 months, around 3 months, and this is about IT and sports good manufacturing. And this is a different domain that you worked before. So you worked at medical domain, as far as I understand, before, and then at e-commerce. Why do you change domains?
No. I think for, I guess, an engineer, there is maybe a tech stack. How often do you change tech stacks? And then there's probably what we're talking now about industries. Basically the application, right? Understanding, the business process. And I think for a very long time, the business domain didn't matter too much to me, certainly not so much as an engineer, because if I'm skilled at, developing mobile apps, at the end of the day, this is about design and user experience and a little less of exactly what the app is about.
Yeah, you don't care about the name of the label. You just call it a drug or a item in the store.
I mean, you have to learn it, right? You get more experience, but it's maybe not the primary approach that I used as an engineer. Now that I'm working, especially because I'm now working a lot also with ERP system and internal software. So my company's main product is not software. My software is kind of leveraged to produce other products. And then it's, of course, certainly more complex, like supply chain management, logistics is super complex. And I wish I had a bit more background in there. It's a learning challenge. But it's also the way I define myself right now is more that for me, it's about collaboration, helping collaboration, facilitating interaction, good communication. And this is definitely shared between all types of domains.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're here, you don't go very deep or so right now in their business domain, but rather in establishing their collaboration and their working and the flow of people.
And there is a need. So I pride myself of having a technical background, and what it does for me right now is not coding, of course not, but it's understanding the problems, or being empathetic to the problems that engineers experience. And in the same way, if you want to help collaboration, I think you have to have an understanding of the problems that also business stakeholders have, and people in the supply chain working on these systems. Otherwise, if you are helping with collaboration is also a tricky task. So there's certainly a lot of value also in knowing this, but this is not where I'm coming from right now.
Yeah, got it. Every company here puts a different set of requirements for a position called engineering-manager, and I would say also for head of engineering, they're quite different between the companies. However, they're kind of a head of engineering or director of engineering and VP of engineering. They take care about different things. So VP of engineering is more focused on people typically, and their director of engineering is more focused on technological part of their solution or of the product. Are you mixing those two, or are you more in their solution part as a head of engineering?
Yeah, the way I experienced kind of this career path is that maybe technical lead is hands-on, but also starting to manage. Engineering manager is about one team, and then the role I'm currently having is head of engineering, director of engineering, which is about multiple teams. And often there's maybe a hierarchy of there is an engineering manager and then reporting to maybe a director of engineering. And the way I know it's maybe VP of engineering is maybe one higher up, but I think VP engineering, what's interesting about to compare it with a CTO, let's say, where usually a CTO is more, it all depends on the definitions, right? But CTO sounds a bit more like being into the technology and into the future of, the technology is used in the company. And the VP engineering is usually working inside the company on organizational collaborative topics. So I guess from a approach kind of a style, not from the position, but from approach, I'm defining my role a bit closer to that of an VP of engineering than a CTO.
Got it. So it's kind of growing more from EM and kind of going the senior EM, you can call so to say, and then going further and further, but still staying in their EM space. And what would be the 3 skills necessary for becoming a head of engineering?
Yeah, I think we touched on these, right? Like I think understanding the problems, you don't have to be able to solve the problems yourself or find solutions to this, but you have to understand the problems to help people. I think facilitation is really important. Because you need to engage and collaborate really well in a team. I think that's a super important skill. And then probably the third skill I would say is communication. You can't over communicate, and it's even more complex. Different means like Slack and email and messaging and video online, in-person communication, and also distributing the right messages to the right people. I think it's a super important skill.
No, yeah. Well, with the over communication specifically when you're online, I think it's you have to over communicate to make sure your message is spread, and people they might get lost in Slack Teams messages, but to make sure they hear it, read it, perceive it, accept it, or disagree, and start communicating and talking to you or somebody else about this message.
And maybe just to add on this, like an interesting twist I'm applying for a year now is that I'm also feel that what I'm posting on LinkedIn is adding to this communication, because a lot of colleagues also see, what I'm interested in, what I'm writing about, and often, maybe they don't take part in the conversation on LinkedIn, but then you meet them at a barbecue and they say, "Hey, I was interested what you talked about." So that's also, more a kind of an indirect way of communication, but also, sometimes sets a certain agenda, or what's important for me or what I'm thinking about, maybe a bit more future looking than day to day. So I find that an interesting twist.
Good tip actually to do this. All right, and then what is obviously interesting is possibly not here, but in the current position, but during your career is when you were growing from EM toward the head of engineering. Tell us about your failure. What went wrong? When you were, I don't know, firefighting and something goes wrong, or tell us a story. Just curious, what was your thing?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I guess in the beginning, because I was coming from a technical background, I was super deep into the technology and super deep also into micromanagement. Hey, I have this experience, I know better. And it took maybe a year or two, and maybe also managing other teams to understand, hey, you are not in the middle of the technology anymore. Also, your skills deteriorate, like getting worse, right? You should maybe keep a little bit out of that and helping people find the solution. So I think I pissed in the beginning. I pissed off a lot of people by being too deep into technology. And I think we touched on this as well. I think now what I'm hoping to achieve is also, how much you attach your identity to your suggestions and what you want to achieve. And, trying to get. So you need to find a balance between, being passionate about certain topics, but also, flexible about, different kinds of solution. And there's certainly sometimes where I didn't find this balance, but this is something I'm really working on, not defining myself through my ideas, but actually, how I can help people and work with people.
Yeah, interesting. And then when you realized that as you said, in your early days, you were still trying to dive with a technical hat on in the solution, in the product that you worked on, and then basically said, okay, I have to step back. How does this change your working schedule, your working day? Like, did you introduce more one-to-ones, or did you get less of coding? So how did this change your working day, and what is your typical working day schedule, procedures, or I don't know, meetings that you have these days?
Yeah, of course, I have one-on-ones with every member of my team. This is just about still manageable. I think if the team grows too big, then sometimes
how big is your team now? Sorry,
it's currently 10 people, but growing to 12. And that's why we are thinking about, introducing tech leads or engineering managers to help maybe manage parts of the team, because otherwise it gets too much. And I'm trying to attend at least one meeting of each team. It's usually like a sprint review or maybe a retrospective, some meeting where I can have an overview and also bring my support. I think retrospectives are interesting for me. If the team feels safe to share that with me, I'm always happy to also chip in and help. Maybe I can move certain things that are not so easy to move for the team. Then meetings with product managers of the teams is important to understand what the people are working on. Meetings with my peers, so we are aligned. Usually, we organize this a bit as a more like an informal lunch, so we can be we understand what everyone is working on. The head of engineerings are fairly, specific to their domain, but of course, you can help each other out and understand, what are the common problems. There's a staff meeting of the kind of leadership team of my manager and his team members. Yeah, that's about it. And then, I think interviewing, of course, that's a large part of it. I have multiple interviews every week. And then hopefully still enough time and a flexible schedule, because if someone comes to me, I really want to say, hey, yes, I have, a space for you, and we can discuss. So I'm trying to always leave a little bit of gaps between my meetings. So if they run over, it's not back to back, and I have also some time to decompress between meetings and prepare for the next topic.
Do you put blocks in your calendar for those purposes, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, I find blocks tricky because it also a bit like signals to people, hey, stay away. So I do have one block, which is this meeting-free day on Fridays. I think we discussed it briefly. So we try to keep Friday meeting-free, and this is really the time I enjoy, working on documents, or new job descriptions, or strategy, or new framework. So that's important for me. With the rest of the days, I kind of accept my fate as a manager. It's the manager's schedule. But when I can, like when I schedule meetings, I always try to leave a half an hour gap between meetings. And usually that works out well.
Nice. Do you miss anything from your engineering past?
Yeah, I guess if it's anything, then having these quick feedback loops, especially if you work on user-facing software, you implement something and then you can use it straight away, or you can show someone. I do still do some technologies. I teach React, the React Web framework, at a non-profit school, so I'm still involved in JavaScript and
Nice.
React and web. application. And I run my own little website. It was a mistake, but I did build it up myself and, integrate everything there. So from time to time, I have use of my tech skills as well.
Nice. So basically, you still have some hands-on on their technology, and they're kind of try as far. Well, that's typical for the manager. What I hear is that people are saying, "Well, I have a pet project or some activity that I can substitute the absence of for their engineering practice that I used to have." Do you want to go back one day, or are you more happy here as a manager?
I haven't really considered yet. I think from time to time I was thinking, hey, if I started a completely new company, I wouldn't mind also, working 1 or 2 years on, in the middle of technology, starting up a company. But yeah, I'm fairly happy where I am, and over time, this is what I've become really good at.
Yeah. Nice. Well, then good luck and in new challenges in your current position. And I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you very much, Klaus, for this conversation. If people want to reach out to you or read your thoughts, ideas, where should they go?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. Please connect with me. I'm also writing a newsletter. So if you go to my profile, you can subscribe to my newsletter. It's full of sketch notes. And so it's about leadership and sketch notes. And yeah, I'm happy about every connection. And please message me on LinkedIn.
Are you doing the sketch notes yourself?
Yeah.
Nice.
I've started this. It's kind of connected with this facilitation topic that we discussed. So in person, you also draw flip charts, etc. And I do sketch notes, and I visualize leadership concepts. So maybe that's a good way to visualize them and memorize them as well.
Nice. So thank you very much, Klaus, for this conversation. It has been a pleasure to have you here and talk about this really interesting concept of positive psychology and the several facilitation skills that you mentioned. Thanks again for your time and being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Great discussion, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you. And then, dear listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we are waiting for your comments about your busiest ever day in your life to understand how many meetings you had. And if you have any questions to Klaus, please reach out to him, or you can also put the comments down below. Klaus can ask you to answer those comments if they are coming our way.